Astral View, and we're back with special guest Emily Breedlove. Emily is going to talk to us about disrupting with compassion. Hi, Emily.
Hi, Aisha.
So, Emily, tell us a little bit about what it means to disrupt with compassion.
Well, so I am an entrepreneur, and I have operated very much in the middle between working with the government, working with universities, working with nonprofits, and being an entrepreneur. And so I've learned personally how just showing up in the room and doing the work that I do, because I'm different, because I'm a mompreneur, I'm usually the youngest woman in the room, that just my presence in and of itself is a disruption. And it took me a long time to start recognizing what the personal responsibility was to be a voice on behalf of the rest of the people who were not in that room. I see disruption as consciously being aware of how your role in the conversation has the potential to have significant impact within your community or the work that you're doing.
Right.
So disruption is just causing a shift, whether it's big or small.
Yeah. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So, as an African American woman and often seen as a strong woman, I think sometimes I just have a question. You know, I don't even know that I want to disrupt. I just want to say, hey, can we look at the system, or can we look at this process and see how can we make it more equitable? How can we make sure that we reach our outcome? And I still feel like a lot of times I'm seen as aggressive or a disruptor. What can I do, or what magic words can I use to kind of help ease that tension?
Well, I wish I could tell you there were magic words. I'd be making a lot more money if there were. So what I actually realized, it's through this process that I started tapping into, and you'll get this, my mother bear instinct, right? So I'm a mother of two, and I started seeing how I push my children. I push my children because I know what they're capable of. I know that that if they really focus on raising their own standard and challenging themselves, but also holding themselves accountable, that comes from that motherly love, right? And so it was really starting to recognize that I could disrupt and I could challenge the people in my world through standing firmly in, I love you, I respect you, I know that you're capable of doing more, I know that this group is capable of doing more, and I will hold that. I will show up on every board, and I will be the one that says, but should we go further? Is there a part of this conversation that we're not having? And so I think a lot of that too is leaning into the spaces that might be a little uncomfortable, because in essence, you are owning your responsibility to challenge them to go a little further, to be more inclusive, to be more progressive, to include people who aren't at the table. But it's also owning the fact that you're going to make them uncomfortable. You're going to make them feel like you're pushing them to a place that they're not really comfortable going. They're going to get anxious. They're going to challenge you at first. And I think really standing in the, I'm doing this because I know that we have potential in going a little further.
So I've got a question. So many times when people are disrupting or asking questions or speaking out for themselves, you know, if you're a female, you get told you're being hormonal, or she's just in a bitchy mood, or as a gay guy, they're being dramatic, or they just need attention, or like, you know, if you're a person, if you're a person of color, then you're angry or you're crazy. And when someone comes back at you with you're just being crazy or you're just being hormonal or dramatic, how is the best way to counteract that statement to still get your point across?
Yeah. Well, so there's a couple of things that I've looked at, and I really am just trying to practice this in my life and see how I do that, how I show up within these spaces that make them uncomfortable. When you are challenging that comfort zone, people are going to react from a place of protecting themselves, and they're going to often do it by putting you down or by challenging, by minimizing you and the role that you're choosing to play. So what I've noticed for myself and the other people that I've worked with through this process is it really helps being clear on what it is you're really fighting for, what the positive changes and the impact that could come from that disruption, whether it's small or big. And when people do respond from a place of emotion or from reaction, the more that you can bring yourself back to that calculated response of, this is about the opportunity that we owe the people who we should be representing here. I think too, for me, it's owning the fact that, yeah, right now I'm kind of being a bitch. Like when there are moments when you have to stand strong and you unapologetically stand behind the issue or stand behind the change, I really think there's so much in this world that needs to be made better, and it requires more good people willingly stepping into that role of, I will compassionately push you to get closer to where we should be. And so it's a conscious choice all the time in facing the uncomfortable moments, unfortunately.
Yeah.
My question is from a new generation standpoint, because I teach high school students and a lot of girls, and they stand up for a lot of things, and there are a lot of subjects or topics that they're very, very passionate about, which sometimes can cause a lot of conflict, a lot of aggression, because at that age, it's really hard for them to get their point across. As a person who they come to and look up to and come to me for advice, how can I help them be able to stand up for what they believe and get their point across without doing it more peacefully, without getting to that angry point or angry message? So disrupting in a gentle way.
Yeah.
How can I do that?
Well, so we look at this. So I run the Camp Girl Boss program, which is the summer camp for middle school girls. And
Which is perfect.
It's so phenomenal. And part of this process is really teaching girls how to own the power of their ideas and own the power of their voice.
Right.
And so part of that is getting really clear on what it is that they stand for and what it is that they're fighting for. We have had to also incorporate elements of understanding what reacting versus responding. That reacting is that first moment where it's coming from the gut and it's totally emotional. It's usually coming from anger or fear or feeling uncomfortable, versus a response, which is calculated. You take a deep breath. You really stop and reflect back on what is the purpose of this and how can I do it well. But then we also look at conflict resolution and how to lean into a challenging moment. And I think the biggest thing, especially when you're working with young girls, is modeling that for them. Absolutely. Giving them tactics of how to show up in a space where you are challenging what people are doing, where you're challenging and questioning the way that something is operating, and you're presenting a new way of doing it, but also showing it themselves. So we do a lot of practice activities of what happens when you do show up and you're challenging people and it makes them uncomfortable, and it becomes a situation that you weren't really prepared for. Because the reality is when you disrupt, this happens all the time. And it's part of really stepping into that space and owning your role in creating change.
This is hard work.
It
like
is.
At the end of the day, this is hard work. So my question is like, what does self-care look like when you are constantly challenging society and trying to make an impact and change the world?
Well, so it's amazing how once you get really clear on what you stand for, it makes it easier to prioritize those things, because it's not just about self-care for myself, it's self-care for the thing that I'm trying to bring into the world, the way that I'm trying to make positive impact. And that you can't do that when you're tired and broken and empty, right? Your highest form of service is showing up ready to fight on behalf of the thing that you believe in. And so part of that too is knowing your limits, honoring your boundaries, making time not just for yourself but for the work that you do. And I swear all of it comes back to really knowing what you stand for and getting clear on, this is why I do it. This is how I'm creating change. It's easier to then make those sacrifices.
Now, how do we utilize all these tools that you gave us within your relationships with, let's say, your partner, your lover, your husband, significant other? How do we do that? I know how we influence other people, but how do we bring it home?
Well, so I've been really open and honest with my family about the work that I do. And my kids, I do a lot of multimedia, so they're going to watch the Asheville View, they listen to the podcast, they read the articles.
Right.
And so my kids know what mommy stands for. And they know that I'm not just doing this work because I believe in it, I'm doing it because it's changing lives. And so like with Camp Girl Boss, I have to make a lot of sacrifices to pull that off. They're coming with me through the camp. And so much of it is being transparent and being honest with your loved ones, with your partners, with your spouses, with your friends, with those who are in this process, and letting them know that this is worth making sacrifices for, and that we're all in this together. Yeah, so much of it is just being clear, being open, being consistent, and making it a part of your life. Because you really have to. You have to behave this way on a daily basis, especially once you step into it. Because like with equity over everything, it's every choice, every day. It's who you are. It's how you're visible. It's how you move through the world. And you become that source of disruption. But then it becomes really powerful.
Well, I feel like those changes that you're making also in the long run are self-care.
They are.
Because those changes are self-care to yourself. They're going to benefit you. They're going to help you. They're going to put your mind at ease. And I think that's really cool and important.
Well, and so I bet you've seen that too. When you really stepped into equity over everything, right? You became a different person.
I did.
It's like you fall in alignment with this is my purpose.
Yes.
This is why I'm here. This is the work that I'm meant to do, and it changes you as a person.
It did.
Yeah.
And I think that in knowing you and being around you and watching you disrupt not just Asheville, but Western North Carolina as a whole, I've been inspired by you.
Aww.
And I think we all have, and we're so glad to know you, and we're glad that you came today to hang out with us on The View, and we just appreciate you for being here today.
Thank you.
Thank
I'm
you.
happy to be here.
Thank you so much.
You're watching The Asheville View, and we'll see you next week.